Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Louise Douglas. I am going to be your host today here on Earth Heroes TV, an incredible conscious media platform. And today I'm having a conversation with Shay Ryan Douglas. He is the creative director of Earth Heroes TV and a huge inspiration of mine, a mentor who has supported me. And we're going to talk about phases and cycles of life and how we can harness our full potential, understanding these phases and cycles and the natural law of nature. So Shay has influenced me in my life so that I can understand the broader picture of what's happening out in the world and energy and how I can harness that in my everyday life. So I'm really grateful to be here today speaking with Shay. So Shay, I would love to hear what led you on this journey to be able to understand and then go out and share this wisdom and knowledge of phases and cycles.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kiera. I'm really excited to be on this show today. Really exciting times. For me, what led me to this journey was actually a backwards approach, because ultimately what this is all about is really understanding and knowing thyself, really going deep inwards to discover the power of the microcosm of our inner being in relation to the external world and the macrocosm of our universe, and led me on a path to go down and explore what it takes in order to regenerate our environment. And that led me to create a documentary called The Regeneration, where we've got screenings happening all over the world right now. It's exclusive to Earth Heroes TV platform. But ultimately on that journey, it really led me to go deeper into myself, because I realized that in order to really make a change out in the outside external world, I really had to go inside. And so began to discover the relationship between the seasons, the sun, the year, the moons, and also even more so the great year and the stars, and how that relates to our internal systems and rites of passage as we go from child to boy or girl to man or woman, into grandparent or grandmother, grandfather, and into our death. So looking at the cycles, and I've really come to recognize that all of life is, when I talk about life, I'm talking about things that are emanating a vibration. And when we look at colors as different vibrations, different tiers of vibrations, or we look at emotions as on a spectrum of different feelings of a wavelength. And I'm going to go map this out in a moment on the whiteboard here to give a little bit more context. But ultimately for me, the journey began to really desire to explore from a curious place what was really troubling me. Because if you're anything like me, you'll be experiencing a little bit of at times loneliness and sadness and anger of what's going on in the world, and frustration with things not turning out as I feel they could or should be. And there's lots of challenges that we face in our world in today's current paradigm, and that's shifting at a rapid rate. And if you're anything like me, you've probably experienced a lot of changes internally and externally over the last number of months and years. And so to answer your question, Kiera, really what led me on this journey of discovery was to find the tools and the comprehension and the awareness. It's the keyword, the awareness of who am I? What is it that makes up this biological framework of this skeletal being that I am encapsulated in this skin, flesh, this plasma? Or perhaps am I something more? What other dimensions to our reality, to my existence, makes up who I am? And so that's been a big lesson for me. But I hope that answers your question, and I'm excited to kind of map out on this whiteboard for you a little bit more depth of explanation. So thank you, Kiera.
That's amazing. So incredible to hear, like, this uncovering as you've been discovering, the discover is like the covering and peeling the layers back of knowing who you are at the core. So then you can come out into the space of knowing this internal landscape into the broader external landscape, and then help other people understand their inner landscapes as well. It's really, really powerful. What would you recommend for somebody that is beginning this uncovering and discovering, or even along the journey and coming back into the remembering? Where's a good place to begin for somebody to understand and know thyself? Like, you ask the question, who am I? But how do we uncover this internal landscape that is unseen, and we can't physically comprehend this energy in a physical matter? So what would you recommend for somebody to be able to really know thyself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kira. I really love that ultimately, when we're born as a young being, think about yourself when you were a child. Most of us don't have memory of that. So think of another child. You may be a nephew or a niece, or it could be, just the neighbor down the road. And when we're a kid, we're often, we're starting at this point, 0 point. And we go on this journey of life where we're learning and growing and developing, right? And as we're learning and growing and developing, we are taught by our mother and father primarily to understand ourselves through what they tell us their perspective of the world is. So we're taught from a very young age that who I am is based on who they tell me I am. So they say, I am Shay. I am Shay Ryan Douglas. I am a boy. I am as I grow on older and come into my teen years, I am a soccer player. I am a, human being. I am a male. And we give ourselves all of these labels of words which we attach to, and we identify with these labels of these names that we associate our being towards. But ultimately, that explanation of those labels gives us a perspective that is something that we are bound by. So these are our bonds. This is key because, again, as Kiera has said, the words we choose, such as discover, is the uncover. Discover is the uncovering, it's the no cover, it's the revealing of our truth, right? And so in this identification system of realizing who am I, we've got to break down the words and look at, who we believe we are, because it's those deeper stories and beliefs that create our lives. And so when we start to really uncover from a fundamental level what it is that makes up this being from a physical standpoint, such as our systems, our nervous system, our cardiovascular system, our immune system, so on and so forth. We have multiple systems that makes up this intelligent system of a human body that functions and operates automatically with and for us to thrive in the world. That we go off on these wild tangents and agendas of exploring the natural world around us, exploring the relationships that we have with another person, exploring the outside world by swimming in the ocean, in the liquid, and exploring our creativity that comes through us as we create art and pieces of inspiration to share with the world. Then what, again, these patterns of beliefs of what we attach to the story of who am I, because we may have grown up and our parents told us, you can't do that, you can't be creative, you can't create art. And so that hinders us from actually being who we truly are as creator beings.
Really love that sharing. Thank you so much. Just uncovering who we are in these creative beings, of like really unpacking these patterns and core beliefs that are sedimented from our birth, and then in through all of these different rites of passage that set us up for each next phase and cycle that we go through each season and stage in our life. So understanding at the core that basically what I'm hearing is, when we strip it all back, what is the deepest yearnings and longings in our heart space, and what is it that we are coming back to, which is, for me, is love. And so where do we go from there? If we're uncovering and discovering the core back into all of these patterns and labels, and identifying who we are as our identity, coming back to love at the center of our heart space and being able to come into the heart, what is our next stages and steps from there? So how can we continue to evolve and grow and expand with this identification of knowing these patterns and awareness of patterns? What can we do to create a loving intention moving forward?
Yeah, beautiful question, Kiera. And I really like the curiosity around discovering what it is that is our truth, essentially. And so when we just look at as you mentioned, the significance of the heart in our biological structure and our physical being, we can recognize that it is inherently unique when in relation to the other organs, in the fact that it's the only one that functions on its own, meaning that it pumps by itself, right? So we can recognize that it has somewhat of an intelligence in the way that it functions, because it is pumping oxygen on a physical level. It's also pumping blood cells and life through our circulatory system, giving us the vitality that's required in order to live. So if we just strip it back to that level, and we even look at further the biological structure, you can see I've put a cross in here, and the significance of the cross in religious cultures is a very prominent one, and it comes from this map, because they really recognize the intersecting point of the human body, which is at the power point of the vertical and the horizontal. And when you look at your human body, you'll find your heart at the centerpiece, meaning that the center of our being, the center of our existence, the center of this circle of this map that we created, is that 0 point energy starting point of the heart system, which it interconnects through this interweb of circulatory system, nervous system, immune system, interconnected into our skeletal system, muscular system, and epidermis system, that everything is infinitely connected through even our physical being. Now, when we go further into looking at the different dimensions of human experience, and we look at our emotional dimension and how that relates to our lives, we're generally governed, meaning controlled, by our emotions for most of us. We have this roller coaster ride that takes us up on these huge, wonderful highs, then back down into these devastating lows of sadness and depression. And eventually we end up finding our middle ground, that kind of equilibrium of balance. And so when we understand the functions of a pulse, if we think of our heart again, and we measured next to a heart monitor, we will know that our heart has a pulse, right? It has these ups and downs, meaning that it's pumping and we're alive. If we hear this dee, like all the movies, and there's no pulse, it means we're not living, we're dead, right? And so inherently we can recognize that this sine wave, this pulse of a vibration, is inherently important for life to function from a biological standpoint. Now we can go further and recognize that through the map of consciousness with the Hawkins scale of consciousness, that emotions too have a certain vibration, meaning that these emotions, depending on how we're feeling, can be heightened and like really extrapolated, or they can be more at an equal point, more calm and more restful and more connected and more in the heart space. So when we see that this 0 point is, representative of the heart center, then we can look at how we can find, and ultimately I want to be able to map this out for you guys, but offer solutions in order to identify where you're at and what you're feeling, and how you can use this map to understand yourself more, so that you're able to regulate your emotions more, you're able to regulate your state out of a conscious choice, out of your free will, to live your life in a place that is in your heart, that is more loving and caring. But what we will realize is that although most of us will want to be living and loving and serving and helping our friends in our community and making the world a better place, we can get caught up in, a life that we despise or we don't want, and we can fall back into these old patterns and these old programs from when we were a young age, when we were a boy or a girl, and we're learning about life, and we were told to do or to be, or we not told. No one was there. Maybe we didn't feel anything, and there's an emptiness and a void that is the initiation of that pattern, that pattern that plays out in our life, and that may appear and go away and appear and go away. And infinitely, when we connect these lines, it looks like this. It goes up and it goes down, and then it goes up and then it goes down. And so what does that represent? This infinite flow of energy that is in our lives, that is transforming and changing, and we're having highs and lows, and all this experiences are leading us to, where is it coming back to? The 0 point every time, the starting point and the ending point of all flow of transformation, which is in our heart center. And what do we know the heart is responsible for? As Kiera mentioned, the unconditional loving space towards all beings, all people, and most importantly, including to ourselves. So it's really key to recognize in this model, in this map, and in this body, in this experience as a human, that we're identifying what it is that makes up who we are in this life.
Wow, that's just incredible. Just finding what I'm hearing is that when we come into this cross and this central point of point 0 is like when we come in these ebbs and flows of energy and waves, that we're always coming back to the heart. And we can come from this place and observe the patterns that are happening, and instead of getting caught into these emotions and the energies and the waves of the vibration, is how can we be the observer and witness so that we can respond and regulate, as you said, these emotions that come and go, so we can come into balance. And I find like that cross symbolism of the vertical alignment with the horizontal alignment is really important in the aspect of balance in life. So balance where we are outwardly expressive and we're with people, socializing and sharing generously our heart and our love and kindness and being compassionate to one another, but then also coming back into stillness and inward focus and alone time, and having different practices that can support that vertical alignment so that we can come into our center, and then we can come from that place. And when we come into the vertical alignment, remembering, as you said, that compassion for self. And I feel like forgiveness is a huge part in finding this unconditional love and compassion. So what would you recommend for those that maybe are in the waves, because the waves of life happen? We're human beings. Sometimes we're not always in our center. We can get thrown off center. Maybe what is it that throws throws you off center and that can bring you back to center? What is it that people can use to be able to harness this energy of identifying patterns and seeing that it's boundless energy of love that flows constantly, and we've got all this abundance of energy that we can access? So what would you recommend when we come off center to come back into center? The most common things that throw us off.
Yeah, nice one, Kiera. That's a really good question around finding, ultimately the triggers that throw us off our course and off our center, and how do we get back on to our course? What tools can we initiate to be able to understand this system and regulating our functionality in the world? And again, the key point here is our emotions are driving our lives. And so we can unconsciously be experiencing a wide range of emotions such as frustration, anger, hesitation, procrastination, like sadness and grief that can be playing unconsciously and just coming up, like spurting out of overflow to the next person who just so happens to fall in our, our vicinity, in our space. Or we could really look at, again, the patterns of nature. And when we just go back to this map for a moment, we can see, and something that I love doing is observing nature, observing the sun, observing the movement of the wind and the trees and the riverways. And we know that all riverways are flowing in a curved kind of flowing, moving sort of flow, let's say, and that it's always changing and very organic and very natural, and is leading to a source of a larger body of energy, of water. And what happens is and the key to all of this, and why I share this relevance in observing the landscape, is because when we observe our internal landscape, meaning our emotions, when someone comes up to us and says something to us and it really upsets me, someone might come and say, "Oh, can you do the washing?" And then it's like, "Oh, like I always do the washing," but you never, like, instead of getting stuck in the story of the emotion of the experience and reacting, like being the observer, just as we were observing the landscapes and the external world, seeing how the ocean flows, seeing how things move, we're observing our internal landscape to observe our emotions in the moment. And instead of reacting, we're just observing, wow, I'm feeling really upset by apparently what they said. But the next key is, after observation and awareness, and you want to resolve, this conflict that's coming up inside on the internal landscape, it's asking the questions with curiosity to go deeper into discovering, as we started discovering, what the root cause of that emotion is and where it came from, and healing it at the core. Because just like the heartbeat, it goes up and down, but it's going to come back up again eventually, and come back down and up and down and up and down. So we know we can be prepared and we can anticipate in our lives that we're going to be presented with challenging moments that are going to present themselves in an opportunity to be able to heal and resolve and discover the root of that core wound, ultimately. Because if we weren't wounded at some aspect, that then we wouldn't be getting triggered, and we wouldn't be feeling these, overriding feelings of anger and, despair and fury. It wouldn't be relevant if we didn't have some wound that needed to be, as Kiera mentioned, held and loved and cared for and compassionately guided in a way that can be loving and healing. And so when we just simply observe our own emotions in relation to our environment and what's going on through time and space, these are our, guidelines for a moving and changing reality that we find ourselves in, then we can be gifted the keys to be able to remember how to regulate our own state through our breath, whether it be short, sharp, and get increasing energy, or long and slow and calming our energy, dependent on what's present and available in our environment, of what's necessity or what's needed. And realizing that as a human being on this journey, there are other human beings on their journey who, just like me, have needs that need to be fulfilled in order for them to thrive, just as I have needs I need in order to fulfill a meaningful life. And so then the question becomes, how can I not just, fill up my own cup, as they say, but fulfill all of my essential needs to thrive in the world? But then how can I fulfill the needs of others and help them on their journey? Because then by contributing and serving, I will actually be fulfilling one of my own internal needs. And so that would be a starting point to bring it back into balance, to realize that it's not all about me on this journey, but it's all about how can I be to serve others on this journey together.
Yeah, wow, that's just super powerful and potent to hear. Thank you for sharing that, Shay. It's like when we observe our environment and our internal environment, to really be curious and ask the questions of where is this root cause emotion that's driving us coming from? And the core, when we strip it back to, this service that you're speaking to, of wanting to share our love. And when we've come back to the triggers or the emotions that are arising and our needs, I find that when we come to the core of it, it's always coming back to wanting to be loved. And how can we hold ourselves, like you said, and others in this space of just our deepest yearning of love, and how to love each other and unconditionally love ourselves. And so with that, of like being in the depths of like uncovering love, what would the ideal, incredible, heaven on earth look like to you if we were all in this place of love? What would it be for you?
That's a great question, Kiera. I love it. And I'm really glad you put that up, because I want to speak to this. And oftentimes when we speak to love, we really romanticize this ideal of love being beautiful and gracious and expansive and butterflies and rainbows and all these, gorgeous things in the world, when my experience of a loving cause or action is often at times an inversion, meaning that sometimes I've had to, and probably many of the listeners who are tuning into this call might relate to, somewhat of a dark night of the soul, where we go to the depth of the pit of our moment, where this is actually when it's revealed to us what it is, our purpose is, and why we're actually here, and what our truth is, and piercing through the veil and coming out through the mud, or seeing the light in a sense. And so without that polarity of that duality of experience, we wouldn't actually know what's on the other side. And so love often leads us to a place where we have an opportunity for growth. And when we're growing, it's not necessarily always really fun and juicy, and it may be juicy in terms of challenging and resistance, but that's at the edge where we can expand upon. And so there's this energetic and magnetic pull between both the, let's say, positive and negative charges of emotions of life that lead us to this loving state of actually accepting and appreciating both aspects of our being and encapsulating that all into one. and to be in a state of unconditional love is to accept all elements above and below, the positive and the negative, the yin and the yang, the man and the woman, the hot and the cold, the angry and the happy, the sad and the joyful. And so love, think about, where we all seek love is in a relationship with another human being. And we can just go deeper into asking, am I unconditionally loving this person, or am I expecting something from them and loving them conditionally? And so when we look at the core root of our heart, bringing it back to our biology, our heart functions for us every single day unconditionally, pumping, functioning, and doing so much more for us unconditionally. So when we see it from that perspective, we can really begin to appreciate the significance of this life and being in our hearts.
Yeah. Wow. So it really acknowledging and accepting each phase of life, whether it be the morning and the dark times, that the pit, like you said, in the mud, or as we rise through and we learn the blessings and we find the blessings and the lessons from those aspects and times and phases. So I feel like, yeah, it's just incredible to how we can harness and embrace all of life and really just come from this place of acceptance to be able to live in our fullness in each phase and cycle, whether we be grieving and letting go so that we can make the way for the new space and things to come through. That's really powerful. Thank you so much, Shay, for sharing. And thank you, everybody, also for listening and tuning in here on Earth Heroes TV. It's been such a great conversation, and I would love to share that I'm really looking forward to an interview with another mentor of mine, Jane Hardwick Collins, which will be next week. So join into that live and tune in to hear what we have to say about rites of passage and women's phases and cycles of life and how that interconnects with these different natural laws as well. So thank you again, Shay, for joining us. And thank you all those people who have shared and their time by listening. And if you have some comments that you want to leave or things that you want to share, continue to embrace each phase and cycle of your life. And is there any particular events or places that people can find you, Shay, up and coming in the future?
Thank you, Kiera. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Give us a thumbs up if you like it. Leave us comments if you have any questions or an area that you want to go deeper into. I just want to thank you for your time and showing up in this moment, and looking forward to more interviews coming very soon.
Thank you so much. And we're sharing our love with you now. Blessings for your day.